Well, to honor your parents basically just means to show them respect and to hold them in high regard. And this is taught in the Bible in Ephesians chapter 6 and verse 2, where children are commanded to honor their father and mother. And we're also told there that it's the first commandment with a promise. And that's pointing us back to the Old Testament and actually to the Ten Commandments, which are given in Exodus 20 and then again in Deuteronomy chapter 5. And it's the fourth commandment in there, but it's the first of those commandments with a promise attached to it. And really, in the Old Testament, when that command is given, it's not given to just children. It's actually given to everyone, to all the Israelites, whether young or old. So really, honoring parents is something not just for children, but for everyone of all ages to do, as long as their parents are still alive. 1 Peter chapter 2 and verse 17 tells us that we need to honor everyone. So as Christians, we need to show respect to all people, not just to our parents. It doesn't matter, what kind of status another person has. We need to show them respect. So why does God specifically command children to honor their parents then? It's because it's hard to honor your parents. It's hard to show honor to someone whom you're supposed to obey, especially if you're being told to do something you don't like to do. You might obey, but you might do it with a grouchy attitude without showing respect. And so I think that command to honor follows naturally after that command to obey.
So it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to agree with everything that your mother and father say, but I think especially in those moments where you have disagreement, to be able to interact with them in a godly way and discuss things rather than argue things, to hold their opinion maybe even higher than your own, and to really listen to the wisdom and insight that is given to them by God.
Most teenagers, are now adults physically, but in many ways they're still children as well, because they're still living with their parents and they're dependent on them for their livelihood. So, as long as you're depending on your parents, you really should be obeying them, is what I would say. Once you move out, you're on your own. If they give you a command, you're free, but you still need to honor them. What if your parents are telling you to do something that's wrong? Because parents aren't perfect, especially if they're not saved. Why should they even care what God says? But God doesn't say, as long as your parents are godly people, you need to obey them. That's not what He says at all. Children need to obey their parents, even though they're not perfect. But if they're commanding children to do something that's blatantly wrong, like to lie or to steal, well, then we need to side with the apostles in Acts chapter 5, where they said that we must obey God rather than men. So God is your ultimate authority, and you have to obey Him if there's any sort of problem with what your parents are telling you. But that doesn't mean that you can't honor your parents.
And when they're clearly wrong, to not throw that in their face, to not to elevate yourself above them, but simply to ask if maybe you could discuss this further, if it's a topic that you could talk about more later. But I think to honor definitely means to have that respect for them and to treat them as God demands that they be treated.
There's really never any excuse not to honor your parents. You might not be able to obey them 100% of the time, but you really should honor them every single moment.